me and him decided to do a hike. We did a very big hike. We hiked about 10 hours up a mountain, and we camped at this sacred lake for a night near Calca. I had a really nice day, chilled by the lake, views all over the Andes Mountains, just pristine nature. We woke up at 3 a.m. in our tiny little tent up the top of this mountain, hours and hours from any village. And our entire tent was illuminated like there was a floodlight above the tent, and there were moving floodlights moving around us. And we were both absolutely gripped with terror.
Stargate Voyager.
Well, I am excited to be joined by somebody that I've been following for 5+ years on Instagram, Reese Rogers. He's an explorer, men's health expert. He's into physiotherapy, healing martial arts. But again, we connected just over 5 years ago with, as I was starting my Megalithic Marvels Instagram account. That's what I used to be called. Now it's Stargate Voyager. We just connected because I'd find some of his photos and I'd post them on my stories. And so we'd message each other back. And Reese, you've been all over the world, and you were recently responding to some of my posts regarding our last Peru tour, I believe. You said we should get together and talk about some of the crazy stuff I've experienced in Peru. And you mentioned the word Stargates, government demolition of inner Earth entrances, and UFO interaction. So you've got my attention. So welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Very good, Derek. Happy to be here. Thank you for the intro, and thank you for your time today.
And you are there in the UK, right?
I'm in the UK, yeah. I'm from Wales, which is west, but I live on the south coast in England.
What got you into the megalithic, ancient history, almost forbidden history side of this?
Well, I think within the words you've just used there, it was the forbidden element of the history that really caught me. About 2011, I started going through what I call an awakening process, I guess. After studying in university, becoming a physiotherapist, I was seeking ways to de-stress from the hospital environment that I was working in as a young frontline physiotherapist. And through that, I was investigating meditation and Eastern esoteric arts such as Tai Chi and Qigong, which I still practice now. And along with that came sort of the Egyptian mystery school stuff. Things like John Anthony West's work was something I was really drawn to at the time. And from there, I just started to really get into this whole world of the megaliths through the work of John Anthony West, and also through Eric von Daniken's book, The Chariots of the Gods. So it was kind of John Anthony West, Eric von Daniken, and Graham Hancock, of course, who were really instrumental in my early discoveries of this sorts of information. And I began by looking at these places that they were talking about, far-flung places like Peru and Egypt, and then working out what I had close to me that I could go and investigate. And coming from Wales, there's a lot of dolmens, a lot of standing stones, and we've got Stonehenge in England, Avebury, Stone Circle. Like, you've recently been to the UK, so you've recently visited some of these sites as well. And another site in the north, Arborough, near Manchester. So I started to visit some of these sites in the UK whilst I was building an understanding of what this mystery in this, as you said, forbidden history really was all about. And I just felt a very strong draw to it, even if I wasn't quite sure in the beginning why.
Yeah, and you're right there in such an amazing part of the world where you have access to visit so many ancient sites that aren't too far away. Here in the Seattle area, I've got to jump on a plane to go fly to Peru or Stonehenge, but it's kind of right there in your backyard. So yeah, I was looking back on our Instagram message thread there. You've been to so many fascinating ancient sites there in the UK, dolmens, but then you've been to Turkey, you've been to Italy, and you've been around some of these really little known megaliths in Turkey. You've been to so many fascinating sites, and then of course Peru. So tell us a little bit about some of these megaliths that you saw in Turkey and Italy that a lot of people might not know about, that are just still mortarless, interlocking, polygonal.
Peru was the first place I visited, so I experienced the kind of the mind-blowing realization of the scale and the precision of these megalithic structures in Peru. And I spent 4 months there the first time I went, so I really was quite immersed, particularly in the Cusco area, which is why when I went to Italy, I'd already done some research about what was going on in Italy. I'd stumbled across a documentary on YouTube a couple of years prior to what was a road trip with the lads, basically, to a wedding in Italy. And I managed to hijack the road trip for a day and take us off course to go check out some megaliths. And we went to Alatri and Norba, which you will have come across. Alatri and Norba, both incredible sites. Same. What I say about these places in Italy, which it appears there are multiple, dozens of sites around Italy that don't seem to be talked about by the Italian government. They're very much more focused on what the Romans did rather than what was happening before the Romans. They attribute these sites to the Etruscans. So we visited Alatri and Norba, two sites. Alatri seems to have three large concentric circles of retaining walls with a central acropolis. And the architecture is, I wouldn't say identical to the Peruvian stuff. What I would say is it's the same technology by a different artist, is the way I saw it. It is exactly as you said, massive interlocking mortarless megalithic blocks, slightly rougher finish, but nevertheless impressive. And although I say the finish is rough, some of these walls, me and my friend, when we were at Alatri, we're looking down the edge of one of the retaining walls for the Acropolis, and all the blocks are all fitted together. Some of them megaton, some of them maybe half a ton, some of them smaller, some of them a ton. But it's almost like they were placed and then just cut straight along the edge with like some kind of precision tool. I mean, the laser would be the best thing to do something like that. But to stack these blocks and then straight down the line, perfect corners on the edges of the Acropolis.
And if people are watching by video on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever, I'm going to have some of these photos that you're referencing of you in front of these, like that massive structure at Norba. You're standing in front of it is so colossal.
Colossal word.
Describing it without seeing it won't do justice. It's so massive. You would have to ask yourself, how did men with normal tools do this, right?
That was exactly that was the question that I'd already had in my head from visiting Peru. The friends that came with me on this trip weren't into this line of study at the time, and these were the questions that they instantly started asking. When we're presented with these sites, particularly the ones with these polygonal style walls, cyclopean walls, colossal, as you said, it's not until you're there that you realize what it is you're looking at. You can see a picture and go, oh, that's a stone wall. We turned up there, and that gate, it's like the gates, right? The gates at the front of Norba that you're talking about was mind-blowing. It must be 9 meters tall on each side of the gate. But what really blew me about Norba was as we were driving up, you have to drive up this mountain. I mean, you're going up switchbacks along the road, very nice road, switchbacks all the way up this mountain. And along the way up, there were polygonal ruins on the side of the cliffs every so often, little destroyed parts that you could spot. But the top retaining wall, which is part of what you saw in the picture of me standing in front of, that runs for 2.5 kilometers round the site. And it's on the top of the cliff. So you've got the sheer cliff face of this mountain, and then this 9 meter, 2.5 kilometer perimeter wall running around the very top of this mountain cliff. It's like, the first question you asked was, why bother? Why would someone bother to build a 9 meter megalithic wall on top of a mountain that's already hundreds of meters above the ground? That was super striking at Norba there.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word cyclopean. Obviously, that comes from the word cyclops. And I'm always into digging into the ancient legends, right? And so the ancients believed that the megalithic architecture they beheld in their day was constructed by, often they would say, hybrid giant demigods. the myth that is preserved to this day by the term archaeologists themselves use, which is Cyclopean, right? And
Hmm.
so again, Cyclopean architecture, if you're new to what Reese and I are talking about, consists of massive megaton megalithic blocks interlocked together without mortar, and they were essentially designed to be earthquake proof, right? So
Yeah.
that they could flex and sway with the earth, which is why they're still standing today. This technology they had to build walls was anti-seismic, and we see it in Peru, we see it in Egypt, but yeah, a lot of people don't know. We see it right there in Italy, in Turkey, in Greece, and again in Greek mythology, Cyclops. These were the giant one-eyed sons of the gods. They were
Hmm.
considered master masons, blacksmiths, metalworkers, craftsmen of this golden age, of this pre-Diluvian world. The European traditions, from what I've gathered, say that Cyclops, they were actually serious artisans who lived under the earth. And again, they were metallurgists. Now, again, did Cyclops actually exist? I don't know. Or was he symbolic of this ancient knowledge, right? This ancient technology. So cool that you've got to see some of these places that I haven't been to. So tell us then a little bit about what you've seen in Turkey, at some of the photos I've shared of you at some of these rare sites, little known sites that also are of the mortarless kind of rough cyclopean style.
Yeah, Turkey was. There's a point I'll come back to on Italy in a bit, and I'll mention it when we talk about Peru. But Turkey was quite a shock, actually. I mean, I went there for a holiday. The holiday wasn't necessarily meant to be about megaliths. I went with my fiance, and we went to enjoy the coast. We went to a place called Bodrum. Bodrum's got a lot going on. Firstly, the mausoleum of Haile Canassus, which was one of the ancient wonders of the one of the seven. God, I'm going to get this wrong. One of the seven wonders of the ancient world, the mausoleum of Haile Canassus. Um, there's nothing left of it because it was pulled apart and turned into what you see in the bay of Bodrum, in the harbour, which is the Crusader Castle. What is left of the mausoleum is a hole in the ground, and there are some massive, what I looks to me, I'm not a geologist, looks to me like massive granite blocks in there with precision carving, like the sorts of things you'd see at Tiwanaku, for instance, or in the Coricancha. Um, but the base layer is still there of the mausoleum. So this mausoleum was this massive, apparently, tomb for Haile Canassus, massive tomb with giant pillars and a roof. There are some old pictures of it. We have an idea of what it may have looked like. But the base layer, from what I counted seven deep. These are sort of meter square slabs, so 1 meter by 1 meter slabs, probably about 6 inches thick. Again, look like granite or andesite, stacked on top of each other, 7 layers deep, with those interlocking, what used to, I think, have like T-shaped metal bars in to link each piece. You've seen those before. I've seen pictures of them in Cambodia. I've seen the old imprints of them in some places in Peru with Tiwanaku as well, Pumapunku. Um, they were incredible. This massive seven pallet thick foundation layer that was laid to then build this entire structure on top of. And the whole town of Bodrum, if you keep your eyes open, is scattered with pieces of megalithic masonry in people's front gardens, rammed into pieces of walls where it's been repurposed by the Ottoman Empire. Um, that in itself, just the mausoleum, I knew about that before we went and wanted to check it out. It was really interesting. But there's a couple of other spots in Bodrum as well. There's a massive perimeter wall. Bodrum Gate is part of it, and that shows very precision. Large, probably almost a ton, megalithic blocks, all quite uniform. So a style that we see more often in Turkey compared to, say, Peru or Italy. Uniform polygon blocks, still fit together, mortarless and massive, forming this gatehouse, two gatehouses, and a long perimeter wall. what with really, really interesting cuts on the corners, very much like the stuff that you identify in Egypt, where there's a very, very severe cut line on the rock, which looks like it can only have been done with some kind of high-tech machining. And this wall runs a long way. We found it by accident on a walk to the beach, me and my fiance. Runs a long way around Bodrum, and there is some pure polygonal masonry further along that wall as well, away from the gatehouse. So those were the two sites within Bodrum that really stood out. And we also went up into the mountains, Antique Kenties, I forget now the name in Turkish, ancient ruins basically in the hills of old fortifications. It was about a 5 mile hike up into the hills and was meant to be a straightforward hike back. No, it wasn't in the end. We got a bit lost, but that's not part of this story. That site also really, really interesting. There was a temple to Athena. They said it was a temple to Athena on the board, which again was made from these same rectangular precision cut megalithic blocks that we saw down the valley in Bodrum on the coast. And then concentric walls building an acropolis of far lower quality, still cyclopean in their size, but far lower quality walls building up to the central acropolis with a viewpoint that looked out in all directions across the peninsula. You know what it's like in these remote sites where you've got the sound of the insects and the heat and the peace and the quiet, just time to take in the beauty and the tranquility. From what I understand in Turkey, there is a lot more. I've also visited Istanbul, which is incredible. If you've been to Istanbul or not, in my eyes, it was what the Byzantine Empire found and built on top of was something very, very ancient. If you look at the Medusa head in the Sistine Basilica, there's two of them. I think one's on its side and one's upside down. Now they're giant. We're talking 1.5 meters squared, cubed, carved Medusa heads, which they're using or have repurposed in Istanbul. I guess the Byzantines or the Ottomans did this, repurposed them to place pillars on top of. Why would you carve a beautiful Medusa head and then stick it in a system underground and just use it as a prop to stick a pillar on? Makes zero sense. There must have been an ancient temple or structure there before. And the pillars within the system, if anyone gets a chance to go, really, really interesting in the system in Istanbul, the pillars are all different. Some, I'm sure, were made by the Byzantines, the empire after the fall of ancient Rome. Some almost certainly were repurposed to build this structure, right? But there's one that's got these strange eye shapes, almost like teardrops all over it. And there's a second one of those in one of the museums in Istanbul. And I think these museums have got a lot of interesting stuff. We only went to one and it took hours to get round. So there's plenty more to see there. But Istanbul to me appears to be a city of layers. And at the bottom layer, when you get underground, there is remnants of some truly fantastic megalithic artifacts like this teardrop pillar and like these Medusa heads.
What you were describing there reminded me of my visit to Alexandria, Egypt, a couple of years ago. Most of the ruins you see there are Greek and Roman.
Yeah.
And there's like graveyard of ruins. But amongst the hundreds and thousands of Greek and Roman ruins, you see much older megalithic pre-Diluvian Egyptian ruins, giant precision cut boxes with precision drill holes in them, just strewn about like they're one of the others. But if you're trained to see, man, this is far older and superior to the rest of this. There's these, pillars all over too in Alexandria. But our tour guide, Muhammad Ibrahim, took us to the most colossal pillar. And I'm blanking on what they call it. The mainstream calls it. And again, the mainstream attributes this to the Romans. But this is the most epic, giant, colossal pillar you've ever seen. When you see it, you're shocked. And if you're watching on video, you're going to see my footage of this. But this thing, he says, was an ancient megalithic pillar that's been repurposed, recarved on the top. But this thing is so huge. Again, you just go, how in the world would this have been raised by normal ancient peoples with primitive tools? But let's get
Hmm.
into your visits to Peru. So it sounds like you were there in 2015 and 2017, and you said
Yes.
you were there for living there for a couple months.
The first time I went, I was there for 4 months, and the second time I was there for a month. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a long trip. It was an escape from London, and I wanted to go on a long trip. I spent the first sort of 6 weeks surfing my way down the Peruvian coast with a couple of friends, and they were my inspiration to head out there. And after they left, I had ulterior motives, which were to go and explore the megaliths and check out the Sacred Valley and do all this stuff that I'd kind of fantasized over and explored via the internet for so many years prior.
Once the party with them was over, it was like the real fun was starting, right?
Well, we went to for my birthday. We went to Paracas. That was kind of like what I wanted to do on my birthday, and it fell in line with the timing as we were heading south, and then we went back up. And my idea of going to Paracas was to get to the museum and see the skulls. And unfortunately, when we got there for the 2 days that we'd scheduled to be in Paracas, it was non-stop sandstorms, and the museum was shut. Everything was shut basically in Paracas for the couple of days we were there, and we left in a sandstorm in the end with bandanas around our faces and sunglasses on, and we were hitchhiking out of town. Um, Paracas in Quechua, from what I understand, which we found out when we were there, means rain of sand. And that was very much the experience we had. So I never got to see the Museum of Skulls, which I was quite sad about, really. But we did make our way up to Lake Titicaca and then all the way around to Cusco. And that's when we all went to Machu Picchu together. That was very, very enlightening and a very, very interesting trip. But I always tell everyone, like, Machu Picchu isn't the reason to go to Peru. I mean, it's one of dozens of amazing sites to check out. It's impressive, it's beautiful, and you've taken some brilliant footage recently, Derek. It's been really nice to see. And really, what got me chatting to you again recently, sort of reliving my times in Peru through those videos. But it was the other sites: Ollantaytambo, Pisac, Chincheros, Maras, Morai, Kenko, Sacsayhuaman, and all the stuff in the hills above Cusco, right, that you've been filming recently, that you can just walk up to, that's not on the tourist trail, that no one talks about. I spent weeks wandering around those hills, sitting on those things they call Inca thrones, right, and then realizing, well, they're everywhere, so they can't be Inca thrones. They've got to be something else. Still not sure what I think all that stuff is. All those strange cutouts. I don't know if you've got any ideas, or if you've been with any guides that have had more ideas on that stuff that scatters the hills around Cusco.
And I got to agree with you. That is my absolute most favorite part of being in the ancient Andes in the Cusco region. It, as much as I love Machu Picchu and the Sacred Valley or Sacsayhuaman and Cusco, that is not my favorite. My favorite is just getting up into the highlands and exploring where there's no guards, there's no red tape, and you are just hit with megaliths galore, right? And yeah, the Inca called these huacas, these what looks like, the mainstream says these were Inca thrones, but like you said, these are just everywhere in the most random places, whether it's a cave or just a rock outcropping in the center of the field. It's like they went through with this ancient technology and just sliced it around like cheese. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hanan Pacha theory, but that talks about the three worlds, and the Hanan Pacha would be the oldest civilization, symbolized by the condor, who shaped the rock outcroppings in the caves, again with laser-like tools. And then you have the Uran Pacha civilization that came along later and built like the walls of Sacsayhuaman. And then you had the Ucan Pacha, the third culture. This is the Inca, who
Hmm.
found this stuff eons later and just worshipped at it, venerated it, built on top of it. I think there's a lot of credibility to that theory.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I heard a bit about that as well when I was in Peru. When you get to speak to a few elders and other explorers that have been there, as well as exploring that idea online. Um, yeah, I had a couple of ideas about those Inca thrones. For a while, I thought they could have been parts of the quarries for megalithic sites, but they don't fit the shape of these other structures. They almost look like these stairwells and things, haven't you, there, Derek? And sometimes they're upside down, and you think, well, that's a staircase to nothing. So they can't be stairs. They look like stairs, but some of them, there's no reason why they could be stairs. Sometimes I think they look like, you know how like when you buy electrical equipment and it comes packaged in polystyrene, and the polystyrene's all cut out to fit the pieces that are inside, almost like that, as if they were like the basis for some kind of other mechanical overlays, and that
Yes.
through time and history, the metal work has gone, or whatever was sat there and fitted in has
Well,
disappeared. You know, a bit like something that hold an engine in place.
I'm so glad you said that because, like, yeah, on our last tour, we had, there's always different groupings of people that are lean towards believing different things. So we had a large group that said, "Oh, this is obviously just this wasn't an Inca altar necessarily. Although it might have been repurposed as one, this was originally just a quarry where they were taking out blocks." You could see where that looks like it might be possible at some places, but then you look long enough, and the way the stuff is cut out, it seems just too planned to be just in a core extraction point. It's so trapezoidal with stair-like sections, and it's so detailed. It does look more like a thrown in places than just some core extraction. And I love where you were just stating that it's almost like a super ancient, like Lego base
Hmm.
to a structure that was built on top of it and interlocked, just like the walls do. And then to further that point, one of my favorite things to look into on the last couple tours, like at Pisac and Machu Picchu specifically, you can find inside the trapezoidal entrances. In some places, the mechanism components are still there that even
Hmm.
spin. This shows me and proves to me they had technology, they had mechanisms. This was a component, and if you're watching on video, you're going to see what I'm talking about, where it was like a massive gate hinge latched onto this cylinder. What I'm saying is the cylinders are still in these gates,
I
and
saw that video of yours.
they even move. That to me is just a smoking gun piece of evidence, right?
Well, Alatri in Italy had the same thing. Um, you see the picture of there's three doorways in the Latry, and was it two gates? Two gates. The big gate, the main gate, and a smaller gate that's blocked off. And the large main gate that you can walk into, I mean, it is big enough for a giant. Clearly, uh, if you can find the picture of me standing in there, I'm 6'3", 192 centimeters, and I look like a very small person in that doorway. But if you look to the top left of the doorway, there is what used to be something that, say, something like this would fit straight into. Like, you can see the hole where it's been blown off, and where it would used to pivot, and where probably the doorway pivoted in and out. You can also see its pot marks with what looks like, hundreds or thousands of years worth of sieges and things that could have happened there at this ancient acropolis. But exactly the same thing I've seen in Italy with these doorways, almost as if there was some kind of giant stone door on a mechanical stone hinge at some point, like what you found in Pisac in one of your most recent videos.
Do you have any theories before we get into your strange stories, which again, we're saving the best here for last? What are your personal theories when it comes to the marshmallow-like nubs that you see on some of the stones, the puffiness of the stones? It looks like they could soften it. After everything you've seen, do you have any theories on that?
The nubs, do you know what? I'm quite theoryless on them. They're so enigmatic and strange. The way I use and visualize the nubs, and rather than trying to create a theory around them, I help use them as an identifier for stuff that appears to be older. You know, when you see these nubs, you go, ah, this is part of that. This is the same as what I've seen in Peru. I've seen the nubs in Turkey. I've seen them in Italy. I've seen them in Peru. Um, and I've seen pictures of them in other places such as Cambodia, Japan, etc. What they are, I don't think they're for tying ropes around to help lower blocks into place. If you wanted that kind of mechanism, you build something far more functional that could complete that task properly. You wouldn't use a little nub. Um, Again, going back to like our modern manufacturing, like I talked about the polystyrene with these Inca thrones, maybe bits off sprues. You know, the way you get like stuff that you have to break out of sprues, and you get the little knobs left over, but they don't seem to serve a purpose, and they're very very strange. The knobs, and I'm glad you brought it up. They are something that I look for when I'm at megalithic sites, as almost like a nod to realize that is linked to another site I've seen, and this architecture is really starting to show me that it is of a certain caliber and of a certain type.
I've been wondering about these nubs, especially specific ones. You see different versions, like at the Coricancha up on that upper level, you see precision squared nubs that protrude out of those walls.
Yeah,
And, in talking with our guides who pretty they know the deeper Inca, Andean legends and culture way better than I do. I'm almost wondering if it wasn't kind of some kind of secret solar language system, meaning because so much of of everything in Peru is related to the solstice, it's related to the sun, Inti, Viracocha, sun worship, shadows, like the Chicana at the Machu Picchu and Pisac, the sacred symbol. When the solstice hits it, it completes. You see, what we only see is half of it above ground, but when the solstice hits it, the other half, the shadow appears below. So it's a full Chicana. And if you're watching on video, you're going to see what I'm talking about. So I wonder if it's more similar with these nubs.
you've just reminded me of the nub-like structures at Alatri in Italy. They're phallic. It's the second gate, the smaller gate, which is blocked off. There's three phallic symbols done in the same style as the nubs on a really interestingly angled megalithic lintel above the door. And you'll be able to find this picture very easily. If not, I can send it over to you. Three phalluses effectively pointing towards each other, again in nub style. And again, if you're following your theory on them being used for light shows, sun landing on this certain directions, I think that would also fit in there.
So let's get into some of your wild stories from your time in Peru, in the Sacred Valley in 2015 and 17. Again, you mentioned stargates, government demolition of inner Earth entrances, and UFO interactions. So I'm going to just let you run with it. Take us into some of the strange experiences you had in Peru.
Yeah, well, it was your video on Nalpa Glacier, which is this cave in the Andes. For any that haven't been there, you have to hike your way up the Sacred Valley from somewhere near Ollantaytambo, off the track, up another valley, and then up the mountainside. And what's very interesting about Nalpa, from what I understand, is it's one of the only veins of that type of blue granite in the area that seems to have been found in this cave and then turned into, to me, what looks like some kind of laser cut wall, right, polished beautifully with a doorway cut inside it. You mentioned there's that other gate that you did a video of recently in Peru, right, out by Puno somewhere by the lake, that red gate. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned it's shimmering, and shimmering exactly what happened. We sat in each of the, probably very reckless and silly of us to do. We sat in each of those enclaves in what they call the shrine in front of Nalpa, and the whole wall lit up with these kind of hieroglyphs and images of people, or there was maybe a couple of people, and it shimmered and glistened in the same way that show Stargate does, right? But that's what happened. that's what happened. It turned into a Stargate in front of our eyes.
I don't know if you heard the story I shared the first time I went to this Napa Iglesia cave, which is
Mm-hmm.
one of my absolute favorite locations in all of Peru because of the location, so remote, high up this mountainside in a cave are these precision cut laser like this altar or console and this portal, Stargate. So when I went there the first time, back in years ago with Brian Forster, he had a assistant guide who was a shaman,
Mm-hmm.
from Inca lineage, and he held this site to be super sacred. It was one of the craziest experiences I've ever had, and it was in the same location you just stated, to where we went in the cave, we're amazed by what we saw. The guide is then this Incan shaman guy is then telling us that the Inca held this to be the most sacred place, and that it was the place of getting the key. And how you got the key was you would kneel down and put your head in that altar looking piece. I think on the solstice, he said, they would get the key in the third eye, and that would allow them to then go to the interdimensional doorway that's cut into the wall and
Yeah.
traverse other realms. So he's telling us this, which totally, sounds very similar to what you experienced in real time. But then he proceeds to pull out a drum and he's telling everybody to just meditate and welcome the spirits. And it was peaceful for a few minutes until this guy started screaming bloody murder. When he settled down, he told us that a puma came through the Stargate, and he either said entered him or came at him, and it literally scared him to death. So that to me was such a crazy experience because it showed this parallel between these ancient sites and the supernatural realm. So
Just as we did this, just as this happened, we're sitting there in the little enclaves of the altar. Me and two other friends. One's got a flute and he's playing flute music, and we're sitting there, as you say, sort of meditating, enjoying the vibe of the place. And a group come up the hill, turn up. Uh, how unlucky could you be? But it was actually very, very lucky. There was a local tour guide and two women from Lima who wanted to come and see the place. So they were Peruvians, and they were being shown by a local guide who seemed to know what he was talking about. We ended up getting basically a free download of information off this guide whilst we were there. I'd had to find the site on the internet, and this was 2017, and there weren't videos of how to get there or anything. I had to go on sort of like Reddit sort of forums, and we worked our way there. Um, we got talking to the guide, and he was really, really interesting, and he was telling us a lot of information about the place. But the thing that struck me the most, and I think you'll find very interesting, and I don't know what story you've been told about the demolished entrance and the demolished shrine. I don't know if anyone's given you any information about that before.
basically been told that there was somebody placed dynamite in that entrance at the
Yeah.
beginning that kind of blew it half off.
So from what I learned before I got there was that the Spanish blew it up. And that doesn't make sense. The Spanish wouldn't have had dynamite. And when this guy turned up, you can see the drill holes where it was drilled into and where the dynamite was placed and where it's blown off the top of the shrine. What this guy told us was that he grew up in the area, and in the 80s, or in the 70s, the shrine was still intact. And that him and his cousins used to come play, but not only was the shrine intact, but the cave went deeper. It's all full of rockfall at the back and you can't go any further. He said none of that rockfall was there. And in the 80s, the government demolished the shrine and the cave, or someone official. And the story he told us about when he was a child was him and his cousin went to the cave, and at the back of the cave, there was an entrance that went all the way in. And they went in one day when they plucked up enough courage as young teenagers, as you do when you're doing these sort of adventures. And they went in with torches. And he said they got about 50 meters in, and both the torches stopped working. They panicked, freaked out, and ran back out. And it was a couple of years after that that what he states was that the government destroyed the site. contra to the original narrative, but that's the narrative that he told us there that day. What I found interesting about the torches not working was that at Alatri, when we were at Alatri in Italy, we were having real issues with cell phones, but not just like reception issues, like screens fuzzing out when walking through different parts of the site. Um, and this is something that I've read from other explorers, that electronics don't work very well in certain places in these sites, and that we get issues with them. And I found it very interesting that if this local Quechua man was right and his story was true, that him and his cousin were heading into a tunnel that potentially is a tunnel to inner Earth, that at some point some kind of electromagnetic frequency kicked in that completely kaput their torches.
I wonder if there's any photo that can be found of it in the 70s or 80s complete, because I would pay to see that.
Yeah, me too. This is his story, and it was very believable from him. He seemed like a trustworthy guy, just from the short exchange. It was very, very nice guide. Um, a lot of the guides in the areas have got far more mainstream views on what all these sites are, and he did not. And it was very interesting to hear what he had to say on the topic of Nalpa. He said there were more doorways like the one that's carved in the side. There were a few more of those false doors, maybe 3 in total, which would make sense when you compare it to other sites. And then a doorway straight in. So you've got like the Nalpa wall with 3 on the wall, and then straight into the mountain, a tunnel.
That kind of corroborates what 2 of my guides were saying when I was there 2 years ago. We went up there with our group, and then the group was heading back to the bus because it was getting dark, but I stayed back. And they let me get back up into that kind of rocky cave area and look around a little bit. And they said similar things, that a lot of this has been filled in, but there used to be some structures that you could see down below.
Mm-hmm.
And something else they told me that was really fascinating, and again, I've been talking a lot about this when I talk about Peru. The Inca venerated these elongated skull mummies.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that this is where they would keep their most precious elongated skull mummies, was in the back of this cave. And they would bring them out during the solstice and set them in the Stargate looking section. And that thing, and this is what they would do at a lot of these wakas, the precision altar looking sites, they'd place elongated skull mummies in there, and these things would actually speak to them on the solstice. They'd be animated, which is just crazy to consider. But this is the Inca's own legend.
Yeah.
And then, did you notice, when you're inside the cave, there's kind of like, looks like an Inca period wall on one side that's really inferior?
Yeah.
Well, even before you get in the cave, if you're looking at it to the right, is another what looks like Inca or pre-Inca style wall that's more primitive. But
Mm-hmm.
this thing looks like it was built for a 3-foot humanoid.
Yeah.
And so I was asking our guides about this, like, I was sitting next to it and I looked like a giant. Why is this built for a 3-foot entity? And they said because these, in their time, this is what they said: the humanoid elongated skull hybrids, or whatever you want to call them, ancients, they were the caretakers of this site, and that's where they lived. That was like their guardhouse.
Peru, man, that part of the world's got so much magic and mystery. You posted a story of some guys going in tunnels underneath Cusco this week. Was it yesterday or today?
Yeah.
Have you been underneath Cusco?
I went in some underground subterranean tunnels, yeah, where we even found human bones and stuff. So that was wild.
Were they megalithic in nature at all, or seemed to be more medieval?
Well, I guess on the backside of Sacsayhuaman, there is a tunnel I went in where there was some megalithic shaping inside it.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like Napa Iglesia, the cave we've been talking about, there's another cave right outside of Cusco. You walk into it and it's just megalithic Hanan
Yeah.
Pasha style shaping. But I know there's legends that the Coricancha connects, downtown Cusco all the way to Sacsayhuaman with a megalithic tunnel. So I know the legends are there. I haven't necessarily experienced it.
I heard a lot of those legends as well when I was there. There was definitely some OGs who've been living there since the 70s who were on the trail of these sorts of megalithic extraterrestrial topics and used to talk about the tunnels under Cusco that you used to be allowed to go into in the 70s, and now they're all blocked off and they found elongated skulls in them. All these sorts of stories I was hearing when I was there in 2015 that just basically was the reason that I ended up staying in and around Cusco for so long, for basically 3 months. After a month or so surfing, I just hung out there because it was just full of legend. And whilst we're on these elongated skull mummies sort of extraterrestrial topic, I'll tell my last story from Peru, which really just kind of shifted my perspective in general on reality to do with extraterrestrials. So I had three experiences whilst there in the mountains, three separate experiences, all within the Sacred Valley. Two in 2015 and one in 2017. The first one was in a hammock in the Sacred Valley, and I'd fallen asleep in the afternoon. I'd woken up and it was nighttime. I'm in Urubamba. You know where Urubamba is, yeah, between sort of Pisac and Ollanta Tambo. And I'm in Urubamba, slightly outside, maybe a mile out the village, at a homestay, sleeping in a hammock. And I wake up, it's pitch black, and rubbing the sleep out of my eyes and just trying to work out what I'm going to do with myself for the evening, probably go in and make a fire. And I start thinking, why are the stars moving? What's going on? They're blinking and moving, but they're moving like that in strange patterns. And I realized that many of them are doing this. And every so often, they'll flash at each other and move away. So this is really ununiform. It's not what you see of satellites. It's really something quite strange. And at one point, I'd probably watched them for about 5 minutes. One point watching them, I see one coming down the valley very, very quickly, and it's got little flashing lights on the side of it. And I realised almost straight away, I said, well, that's not one of these moving stars. That's a human craft, a jet. It comes out, even leaves a contrail behind it. And when that happens, all these little stars I've been watching move and disappear, and the jet comes through the valley, passes through, disappears. There were actually two jets, one and then one following on, so flying like whoosh. And after about 5 minutes, all these little stars that were moving came back. Apparently, when they see these anomaly on the radar, they scramble jets. This is what you hear the world over with these sorts of phenomenon. Now, I tried telling people, no one wanted to listen. Oh, you're just seeing satellites. 2 weeks later, in the same place, this time with a group of friends, we were having a fire outside, and I was actually telling the story, and they were like, yeah, whatever. And we looked up, and I said, look, it's happening again. And it was, and there was far less. There were just a couple of these moving stars, what I've now come to call light ships, my own language for it. No one has to call it that. Doing the same thing. And do you know what happened? A jet came down the valley whilst we were observing them. Again, this is 2 weeks later. A jet came down the valley and these things dispersed. And when the jet had passed, some came back. There's lots of stories of this in Cusco and in the hills around. For the last couple of 100 years, a friend of mine told me that she watched them on Lake Titicaca once. She lives in the Sacred Valley, and she was up on Lake Titicaca, and she was sitting on the lake, and she was watching these things moving up and down. I think she said they might have even been entering the lake. And she asked the campesina next to her, a local lady of the country, the long plaits and the big hats like they wear up in Bolivia and in the mountains. And she said, "What's that?" And the Bolivian woman next to her said, "Let me put it this way, it's strange when we don't see them." So there's these lights in the sky in that part of the world. 2 years later, Derek, I went back, and the friend that I'd also been to Nalpa with, me and him decided to do a hike. We did a very big hike. We hiked about 10 hours up a mountain, and we camped at this sacred lake for a night near Kalka. I'd heard of a friend that camped there, said it was beautiful, really nice camping. Let's pack our bags, let's hike, let's go. I had a really nice day, chilled by the lake, views all over the Andes Mountains, just pristine nature. Saw nobody except a dog. We had a dog that hung out with us for the afternoon, and we saw a couple of ponies. And me and my friend, his name's Max, we woke up at 3 a.m. in our tiny little tent up the top of this mountain, hours and hours from any village. And our entire tent was illuminated like there was a floodlight above the tent, and there were moving floodlights moving around us. And we were both absolutely gripped with terror. So much so that we're both over 6 foot big men, and we couldn't persuade either one of us to unzip our sleeping bags to look out the tent to see what was going on. There was no sound. There was just the lights and the fear. And it lasted for about 20-25 minutes, and we just lay there in silence, waiting for it to end before falling back asleep. Super remote area at the top of the Andes. We had to hike about 10 hours up the mountain to get there. We hadn't seen a village. The closest village was Kalka, which is at the bottom of the mountain. Kalka's not far from Pisac. Something was above us.
And
Yeah.
did you see these before you went to go to sleep in the tent?
No, we were in the tent and we woke up and it was there. Yeah, and it was outside. So we
is it because the lights were that bright that you saw them through the tent?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Our tent was illuminated like you had a football stadium floodlights beaming on the tent. Truth to be told, we were too scared to leave the tent. There was this overwhelming fear within us. I hadn't related it to what I'd experienced 2 years before. Since thinking about it over the years, I wonder if there's a relationship.
Yeah. Do you think those could have been the same lights that you saw way down below in the valley? Now you're way closer to them and they're much closer?
I would say so. I would say that's what it was. Yeah. Whatever those lights were, was what I was. And I've gone through the whole flying saucer, angel, light being, orbs, all the ideas and more. And couldn't put my finger on any of them, to be honest. I kind of kick myself that we never looked outside the tent, but at the same time, I'm not sure what would have happened if we did. Neither of us, and we were both well-traveled guys, had lots of experiences, traveled all over the world. Neither of us could leave that tent to have a look. We were almost frozen stiff.
The first time it sounds like you were by yourself. Second time you were with a group of people, and the same thing essentially happened.
Yeah.
You see moving lights. It sounded like way up in the sky.
Way up in the sky. They each one looked like a pinpoint, like a star, looked like a star, but moving very, I guess, almost organic, not following any kind of pattern.
And then when a real physical airplane jet started coming through with blinking lights, they all dispersed both times, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And when this happened with a group of people the second time, did they believe you?
They did believe me. Yeah, they did. We witnessed it again. Less numbers of these lights, but the same thing happened. What I think is that it was a real phenomenon, and the military saw it too, or see it regularly on the radar, and are scrambled to investigate every time. And I think both times I was there, when the military were also alerted through radar to whatever was going on in the sky, scrambled jets to investigate. Investigation finds nothing, because these things leave before the jets arrive and come back when the jets leave.
Personally, that had to be rewarding, though, when you were literally telling them about your experience the first time and they're not buying it, and you said, it's happening again.
There was some form of real redemption there for sure. Yeah, do you know what? Like I've looked up at the sky sort of every time I've been out in the dark since then, and sat to see if I can see the same phenomenon, and I've never seen anything remotely like it. I saw Starlink once. I thought it was happening again, and then oh no, there's loads of them. There's old stories. I think it was I think 77. There was a famous story in Cusco of three lights hovering over the basilica, the central cathedral in Cusco, and a huge portion of the population in Cusco that night saw it. Three lights in like a triangle hovering over the cathedral, and apparently they just went and left. And it's something that seems to happen in that area a lot. And when you marry it with the megalithic sites and the energy, it just really goes to like a very mystical, very enigmatic story. Really, the whole picture of what's going on up there in the mountains when we're talking about elongated skull mummies, these Stargate type structures, these temples built on top of mountaintops and cities that just defy logic, really, don't they? Uh, Lights in the sky, along with all the stories of the Apus. The Apus are like the spirit guardians of mountains and lakes and forests in Peru, from what I understand from the Quechua culture, almost like elementals.
Yeah, our main guide for our Peru tours, Rumi Alegria, amazing guy. He grew up at Machu Picchu, essentially. His dad was a stonemason, stoneworker, which is partly why he's so good with the megalithic theories, because he gets that. He was a stoneworker himself. But he told me his stories growing up there under Machu Picchu of seeing the same lights you're talking about. And like you said, he still sees them to this day, and he'll often he'll post the videos of it on his Instagram and Facebook. Just last month, I shared a video of his where you can literally see these lights dancing around the sky, anti-gravity maneuvers.
No, I mean
So,
the jets were obvious. You know, they were obvious because at first I was like, "Whoa, look how fast that one's moving." And then I looked at it, and it was just so different. And it had these flashing lights, and it left the contrail. And then I heard the sound. The jets. Sorry, I missed that bit. The jets had an audible sound. You know, came afterwards. You see the jet first, and then as the sound pulls its way through the valley, you hear them pass, and they disappear. These lights that I experienced, that your friend is experiencing regularly, were soundless, but could create light, could flash lights at each other.
yeah, something else that I should bring up on this topic is the subject of the Viracochas, the three tiers of the Viracochas. So, first of all, Viracocha, according to the Inca, was the supreme creator deity, who a lot of their legends says destroyed evil giants in a flood. But then during the epoch after the great cataclysm that obliterated the old world, the survivors were living in darkness. And this is when the Viracochas arrived.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you've got level one Viracocha, like the creator god, and then level two, these Viracochas who actually manifested on the earth. And according to the Incas legends, they had fair skin, like white skin, beards, long hair, cloaks, blue eyes. They had staffs. And the leader, I think, was Kontiki Viracocha. And basically, these entities or whoever they were, according to the legends, went throughout the Andes to the survivors and began civilizing them, teaching them how to build and medicine until they disappeared over the sea and said they would one day return, right? That's why when the Spanish conquered Cusco, the Inca thought this was the Viracochas arriving, returning with white skin. But then you've got, I should say real quick, you've got the third level. There's people like you're saying that live there today, people from the good old days, the 60s, 70s, who talk about level 3 of the Viracochas, who actually will appear in craft and that they live under the mountains and some crazy stuff like that. So that's kind of what's going on. It kind of relates, seems like maybe a little bit to what you're saying. So any thoughts on that?
I know the stories of the Viracochas. I agree. I think there's a link. I think something's going on. I think there's high energy there. I think there's high energy and there's mountains. I'm an energy practitioner. I practice Chinese internal martial arts, Shaolin Kung Fu, Qigong, and Tai Chi. Very in tune with what we call Qi in these systems, sort of aliveness or life force. A very simplistic way to look at it is energy. When you practice these art forms, you become in tune to the subtleties of energy shifts, whether it be emotions from people around you, to Wi-Fi. So I can often hear Wi-Fi, to the energies of ancient sites. Almost like a dowsing rod, I guess. Maybe I would feel that maybe how my body senses. I don't know the science of it completely. Um, and the high Andes have got a very, very, very strong energetic imprint, sense, feeling there. As to these megalithic sites the world over, like the places that we've talked about in the UK, like in Italy, Norba and Alatri were very, 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 very energetic for me. I experienced them very energetically, like places I visited in Java, Gunung Padang, and Candi Suku, Prambanan, Borobudur, all these sites that are built from stone, these ancient sites, which is giant crystalline structures. Basically, that's what granite is, right? Is a form of crystal, have high energy, and I wonder whether these, like you say, the third level viracochas, we'll call them that for want of wanting to really know. I think these third level viracochas are attracted to that energy. Maybe they recharge. Maybe they charge their ships using the energy of these high mountain tops, these massive granite superstructures of nature, right? Mountain tops. These sorts of stories come out of places like Mount Shasta. Um, I'm sure there are stories from Washington too, where you are. Now, I've been to Seattle and up to Mount St. Helens, and that's a place with a certain type of energy also. Um, and I wonder whether they're attracted to these, energy centers, these nature's energetic cores, mountains.
So you went to college and studied, was it physiology, you said?
Physiotherapy, which
Physiotherapy.
in the States is physical therapy, but here we also study the respiratory therapy. So physiotherapy is the two professions combined in the UK.
So tell us a little bit about where did you go to college, and then tell us a little bit more about your passion for physiotherapy and what you call healing martial arts.
So I studied in Manchester, in the north of England, and I've spent sort of the last 15 years practicing my trade as a physiotherapist. And in the beginning of my physiotherapy is about rehabilitating people or prehabilitating. It's about teaching people how to live their lives fulfilled, pain free. Particularly if you have sustained an injury or have a long term disability, then physiotherapists become instrumental in recovery, rehabilitation, and providing you the tools and knowledge to live a fulfilled, sort of pain-free life moving forward, particularly after, say, trauma or chronic disease. And alongside my physiotherapy practice, as I was working in frontline acute hospitals, dealing with people who had car crashes, had strokes, chest infections, anything on the list that you may end up in the emergency room for, you may well see a physiotherapist to help you deal with the physical elements of that injury or illness. And alongside that practice for my own wellness and well-being, I was learning Tai Chi and Qigong. And 7 years or so into that Tai Chi and Qigong journey, I met a master who taught me that my Tai Chi and my Qigong and my physiotherapy were one and the same, were healing art forms, rehabilitative art forms. And sort of since that meeting, his name's Master Titan Lam from Hong Kong, very, very interesting man himself. I fused my practices, my profession and my hobby became my sole practice. And I fused what I learned from healing Chinese martial arts, from the movement, from the breath work, from the meditation, with my knowledge of Western science, Western medicine, and rehabilitation. And I now teach people how to move, how to breathe, how to develop their own personal daily practices from these ancient systems to help promote vitality and longevity in their lives. So I set up my business, Chi Physio, 4 years ago, and yeah, I'm moving forward with my goal, which is to unite the knowledge of these Eastern movement practices with Western medicine to bring some form of harmony between the Eastern and the Western medicine systems.
Like on your Instagram account, you are at a lot of these ancient sites, meditating or practicing, what you do. So let's close with this final question. What is the link? And we've kind of hit on this already with energy, and you mentioned the properties of granite. Tell me a little bit more about the intersection between healing and energy in these ancient sites that seem to be the common link is energy. I don't know if you've been to Egypt, but all of these ancient temples, like the Valley Temple in Giza, Isis Temple on Philae Island, according to the own dynastic Egyptians' own legends, these were fertility and healing centers. It's like you would pass through it and you would heal your body. That intersection of energy and healing, modern day, and these ancient structures.
Yeah, that's I think a very interesting conundrum. I think actually this might be where we can really start to discover the most about these places. I've heard people like Muhammad Ibrahim and Hugh Newman both talk about sort of the healing properties. Hugh's very, very, very knowledgeable about sites within particularly the UK, and there's a lot of old stories within the culture here, the ancient Celtic, Druidic cultures, of stone circles, for instance, being used as places to bring seeds, to bring the seeds for the next harvest, and they'll be blessed energetically as well as with words and with intention before being harvested, or before being planted to then turn into a bountiful harvest. Muhammad Ibrahim has taught of similar things. I think it's actually an elder of his that I've watched. I watched him speaking. I can't remember the site in Egypt, of these sites, and you put your head within these granite structures, and there would be sort of an energy. I seem to remember even that he was talking about the water that would run under the plateau that would create some kind of energetic charge.
That's down in Saqqara by the Step Pyramid.
Yes.
They call it. It's literally known as an ancient hospital. It's just a collection of different ruins, but there's this one part where you go through like this maze, and there's this place that's just large enough to stick your head into, and when you do, you can hear deep rumblings of waters. It's a crazy phenomenon, and he says you're hearing the water table underneath.
Exactly what I was talking about. I think what I really want to touch on here with regards to energy, with the healing, is we know now very much so about the autonomic nervous system and about how we can regulate our emotions, and not just our emotions, but then therefore our hormones, by calming down the breath, by calming down the autonomic nervous system, by accessing our autonomic nervous system. We do that through breathing, through intention, through gentle movements. There's many, many, many ways to do it. Ice baths have become very popular. Certain diets can help. Certain therapeutic methodologies that work around releasing trauma. All these can help us access our autonomic nervous system and effectively change our vibration, change our hormones, change how we feel. From what I understand and have experienced by visiting these ancient sites and feeling the energy, practicing Qigong and Tai Chi at some of these places, if allowed, because you do have to ask, is that it's quite likely that these were places of healing as well, and that people would come to be healed by the frequencies. Now, maybe the frequencies of the stones, of the sites, of the alignments can help us access our autonomic nervous system, can help us switch off the fight or flight response and switch into rest and restore. Maybe this is something that these sites were doing. They definitely do it for me when I visit these places. If they were in a full state of construction and operating properly, then it would be very interesting to record what could happen if you could lie, for instance, in one of these sarcophagi and have some kind of healing experience, or apply your own healing modalities such as breath work, meditation in these sites, to see what could be achieved.
Reese, this has been an insightful hangout. Thank you so much for making the time. How can people best follow you? Tell us your Instagram handle and any other ways people can follow and connect with you.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, Instagram handle is Chi Physio. That's QI, as in Chi, breathwork, physio. And that is the best place to find me. You can also check out my website, www.chiphysio.co.uk. I teach online classes and teach in the community. And as I said, I'm trying to spread healing through movement and breath and the understanding of these ancient Chinese energy systems mixed with our Western medicine systems, and how to combine the two to create optimum health. So Chi Physio on Instagram, hit me up, send me a message. I'm always open to chatting with new and interesting people. That's the best way to find me. It's been really, really interesting too, Derek. Really enjoyed it, and I'm glad we finally got to speak face to face after all these years of sending back and forth conversations and comments about different ancient sites that we've both visited. It's been really, really cool.
Keep up the great work. And it was, again, thanks for coming on and sharing your very interesting experiences in Peru and around the world. And again, everybody watching or listening, follow Reese on Instagram, check out his website. Cool. Reese, thanks again, man. I hope the rest of this year is epic for you.
Thank you, Derek. Equally, brother. Yeah, bless you.